Better.
Can you hear me now? If I scream?
Up.
Okay, can you hear that? Yes. Okay, I'll see if I can use that on radio. But I do want to thank the committee. We are very appreciative of being able to be here today and speak strongly about this issue. So we do thank you for that. We started this journey about 2.5 years ago in order to raise awareness about Common Core. We began with our elected official, Senator Don Foley. Senator Foley took us to share our concerns with the Senate Education Chair, and then we went to the West Virginia State Board of Education. But at each encounter, our concerns over inappropriate and poor standards, adaptive testing, undisclosed costs, and massive student data collection were met with denials and assurances that we were misinformed. But we had evidence. We had evidence that our concerns were valid, and we knew our elected representatives would need to address these problems. So we have continued to raise awareness about the intrusion of the federal government into our classrooms, about the invalid testing, the data collection, the flawed Common Core standards, and what we now see as the exodus from our public schools and the impending collapse of public education. We have made presentations to any who would listen, including here at the Capitol, to individuals and to groups of you. We have been to the West Virginia Farm Bureau, we have been to West Virginia GOP, the West Virginia Grange, the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, county school boards, civic groups, local community groups, and churches. Probably there are thousands now that have heard us. And we now have thousands of followers on our West Virginia Against Common Core Facebook page. In 2013, Senator Foley introduced a resolution into the Senate for a legislative study on Common Core. Again, in 2014, she introduced a study resolution. And we as a group sent a formal proposal to Governor Tomlin asking for a study on Common Core. But neither resolution was ever acted on by the Senate, and Governor Tomlin has never responded to us. So it seemed that our elected officials simply did not see that Common Core is a serious problem. So we reached in our pockets and we pooled our dollars to cover the expenses to bring in the most highly credentialed and knowledgeable experts in the country in Common Core. We have had 5 Common Core town halls in Bridgeport, Wheeling, Barbersville, Morgantown, and Huntington. All of you were invited to these events, invited by many people multitudes of times. To those of you that came, we thank you and we appreciate it. To those of you that did not come, you were the big elephant that was not in the room. And we are still trying to reach you. We will continue our efforts to reach out to you because our concerns over education in the Mountain State continue to grow. They continue to grow because we know these things. We know that the Common Core math and English standards were adopted by the West Virginia Board in 2010 before the standards were ever released. The standards are copyrighted and cannot be changed. Experts tell us that the standards are not rigorous, nor research-based, nor age-appropriate. There were 500 early childhood specialists that have grave concerns over the standards and jointly opposed them. The Common Core's West Virginia, by contract, has agreed to allow the federal government ongoing access to our individual student data. In 2012, the federal government rewrote and gutted the FERPA Act, the privacy law, that very law that was created to protect student data. And the data can now be released to third parties without parental consent, and parents will not even know that it happened. In statute and rules, the phrase, quote, according to applicable privacy laws, means nothing now. And we know something else, and I will just show you this quickly. We have the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. What this book is, these books is about the cost of Common Core that nobody will talk about. But in these books, what we have is the contracts that West Virginia has signed. This includes the West Virginia contract with the Smarter Balance, a $1.6 million yearly membership fee for us to be in Smarter Balance. And also in this contract, in these books, is the contract that is $71.3 million to a company called AIR. That is our testing vendor. Both Smarter Balance and the AIR contract were signed by the state superintendent in January of this year. Both contracts are here in these notebooks, so you can actually see it yourself. And I have 2 computer disks of what's in this for the chairs of the education committees, if they are interested in taking a look. Maybe the $73 million is not news to this committee, but I can assure you it is news to the taxpayers that are footing the bill. And ironically, the Smarter Balance assessment test is not even a standardized test. It is an adaptive test, meaning it changes depending on a student's answer. So no 2 students are taking the same test, which disqualifies it as a comparative student test, which was the original purpose for common standards and common tests. The tests have never been validated. Our kids are currently the guinea pigs for the testing vendor so they can test their test. Something that AIR, the testing vendor, as a professional researcher, usually has to pay for. But instead, we are paying AIR to use our kids for their research. The tests have proven to be long, stressful, and often frustrating for students. Across the state, the testing has taken weeks and weeks of valuable instructional time. And we know that AIR, the testing vendor, does research on social and emotional learning. They call it SEL, if you ever see those letters. While Smarter Balance speaks about psychometric, personality, emotional issues, and psychological variables in their testing. And all the while, we were thinking that our kids are being assessed on math and English. And we know that there was a recent data breach in Massachusetts where parents learned that they too were being evaluated with data collected on how cooperative they are as parents. Bottom line is this: parents do not know what data these tests are collecting on their kids. They don't know what is being analyzed, or what research is being done, or what conclusions are drawn, or what records are kept, or who gets to see it. And we don't trust it. So what's happening? Well, parents are opting out. because they are protecting their children, just as they have a fundamental right and an obligation to do. And they are being met with school administrators who have bullied, harassed, and threatened their children with school suspensions and detentions and loss of scholarships and academic class placement. Although some administrators have been professional, clearly we have those that have disrespected, disregarded students and their parents, and chaos in our schools, all for flawed, unproven, deplorable standards of testing. Members of the West Virginia Board have ignored our concerns. They have called us right-wingers, hosting political events. They have lost the public trust. We believe the people of West Virginia are now poised to support a constitutional amendment that will dissolve this unaccountable board. This is not a party issue. This is about our kids and saving our collapsing education system. The 2015 legislative session left a gutted repeal bill lying on the Senate podium. I am here today to incite you, to inspire you, to implore you, for you to take off your Democrat and your Republican hat, leave them outside on the rotunda floor, roll up your sleeves, get in the weeds, and learn what is happening in these classrooms. You can no longer be a bystander in the Common Core war. This legislature has the responsibility and the obligation to protect the fundamental rights of parents and to save our students. So I am pleading with you today to repeal Common Core, withdraw us from this smarter balance, stop the data collection, and get the federal government out of West Virginia classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you for having me come talk today. These comments are my own and they don't reflect any opinions of the Tyler County Board. I am here as a parent. Let's see if we can get this to work. Outline here. This is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Why should you listen to me? Number one, standards versus curriculum, a culture shift, privacy and parental rights, and listen to the children. Excuse me. So why should you listen to me? Throughout the last 2 years, as Angie mentioned, we have parents and community members who have been involved in finding out more about Common Core. We didn't know anything about it either until we started seeing some funny homework coming home. So to be fair, why should you listen to me? I did not attend college and I do not have a degree. However, I've always had gainful employment in West Virginia. I currently work remotely from a home office using technology. And so let's just say that not having access to a computer in school did not impair my ability to use technology, nor did it impair my ability to enter the workforce. But first and foremost, I'm a parent. And as Angie mentioned, it's always been a well-accepted rule that parents have always had the final authority over the upbringing of their children. That's why I became involved in Common Core, because I do believe that that right is under attack right now. You see, parents have been largely left out of this discussion, mainly because they're not educational professionals. There's a great disconnect between parents and the schools. Schools say they have to do the job of parents because parents are lax in their responsibilities, and to some degree that is true. Schools, when parents do ask questions, the schools reply with, "You just don't understand. You know, you're not an educator, you just don't understand what happens." Parents have largely accepted that and said, "You know what, I'm not an education professional, you are," and so we've kind of exited ourselves. And I'm not saying it's right, it just seems to be the reality. But my child and their data belongs to me, and it belongs to them as individuals. I delegate to the schools the right to educate them on the basics, and I did say the basics. I did not agree to sign over parental rights when I enrolled them in public school, and I don't believe any other parents did either. So Angie just updated you on what parents have done over the last 2 years to educate people about Common Core, so I'm not going to go through this again. My only question is this, and it's a big one. Why have parents been the ones who had to do this research? Why has that been left to the parents? I'm presenting research to you here today that I believe could and should have been done by West Virginia prior to implementing Common Core. Or at the very least, once the uprising began at town hall meetings and parents started coming to learn, why wasn't it addressed then? So let's take a look at who all has control over educational decisions of our children. Who do you think does not have an ulterior motive out of this list? We have the federal, state government, Department of Education, administrators, teachers, and parents. In my view, the teachers and parents are the only ones who do not have an ulterior motive. Federal government has interest in controlling everyone for political purposes. The State Department has an interest in justifying their existence. Let's think about that for a second. Education professionals have had control of education for well over 50 years. Do we see any improvement? Is West Virginia still last, next to last, or close to the bottom? Control is more and more centralized every year, and yet there's little to no improvement. I would think it's time, maybe that's a sign we need to do something different. Maybe we need to return local control back to where it belongs, the parents and the community members. Parents have spoken loudly and clearly across the state, especially in the last year, by attending all of these meetings. They've done their homework and they can prove it. Any of those parents who are here today are happy to meet with any of you legislators who would like to know more and would like to see the actual documentary proof. I would like to see the proof of the success of Common Core elsewhere. Where is that? So in November of 2010, the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, said the following in a speech at UNESCO. 37 states in the District of Columbia have already chosen to adopt the new state-crafted Common Core standards in math and English. I'll call your attention to the red bold text. You really can't see it up there, but it is red. And it says, not studying it, not thinking about it, and not issuing a white paper. So were they interested in whether it was going to be a good thing, or did they have an ulterior motive? But since this isn't about the 21st century workforce, and I don't think it is, it's not about the global economy or global democracy that we're hearing about here recently. Those are all social agendas. It's about the kids. Let's see the effects on them. This is a picture that's gone viral. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a little girl doing her homework, and she's crying. And it was taken by her mother. Her mother's name is Kellyanne Pointner. She took it while our child was doing homework. She captioned it as the first picture of my daughter that I hated. Parents across our great state are seeing these things too. They're seeing crying, fighting, changes in attitude. How about a division between you and your child? If any of you legislators have children, you having fights about homework? Looking at pictures like this and reading about China and Korea, who have large suicide rates because of educational pressures, is very scary. Is this what we want for West Virginia children? We already have a lot of drugs. Do we want suicide too? There are 500 psychologists that Angie spoke of a little while earlier that stood out against Common Core because they were not developmentally appropriate. Has our state investigated why? Has West Virginia Department of Education done any research on this topic and shared it with you, the lawmakers of this state? Research on this very topic is widely available, and it can be provided to you. We have it all. And we can give it to you, and you can read it for yourselves. Can those who promote Common Core provide that same kind of documentary evidence? Is it really a magic pill that's going to cure all our educational woes, and can it be proven? Should we be trying to pattern ourselves after these countries who are now trying to pattern themselves after us because of their suicide rates? So over the last couple of years, we've all come to realize that Common Core is not just a set of standards, it is an initiative. It's about pieces of this puzzle that work together to bring about major educational reform. These pieces include federal control of education, standards, curricula, and data. Common Core will ultimately control every aspect of your child's life. The federal government controls education through the funding, the standards and curricula control through the content, and the data will route the kids into the correct slot in the 21st century workforce. And the global democracy, for that matter. Is this still America? Maybe we should think about that a little bit. So there's been a lot of discussion lately about standards versus curriculum. A lot of hullabaloo, like we don't know what the difference is. And there used to actually be a difference. But let's take a look here about what Bill Gates has to say about that fictional difference, the separation between the standards and curriculum. In case you didn't know, Bill Gates has provided a huge amount of funding to the Common Core movement. And the reason why I say the separation is fictional is that if there was a real separation, why do we have to purchase new curricula every time we have standards? Why do we have to purchase new testing every time we have new standards? Saying that there can somehow be separated is just, it's a misnomer. It's meant to mislead people, in my opinion. That is just my opinion. On to Bill Gates here. He had some quotes that he gave in a speech, and you can go online and actually watch this for yourself, but he said, "We will only know if this effort has succeeded when the curriculum and tests are aligned to these standards. When the tests align with the common standards, then the curriculum will line up as well, and it will unleash a powerful market of people providing services for better teaching. For the first time, there will be a large uniform customer base." Is this about kids? So why don't the standards meet the actual standard? You see, there's a group in America, it's called the American National Standards Institute, and their purpose is shown here. I'd like to call your attention again, and this is supposed to be read, but you can't really see it. They promote and facilitate standards and assessments, and they safeguard their integrity. So there's a specific process that's supposed to be used in developing standards. They're called ANSI. Well, you can look up ANSI's critique of Common Core, and you can find that they were written in a manner that violates the national and internationally recognized process for writing standards. The process by which they were created was so fundamentally flawed that these standards should have no legitimacy. There is a recognized protocol for writing standards, and the Common Core standards failed to comply with that protocol. You see, they should have been rejected based upon these facts. This report's widely available. You can go read it for yourself. They tell you everything that's supposed to be done and everything that wasn't done. Now for a real-life example, we're told that there's not been any examples about the standards given, so I thought I would address that. This is actually, there's some keywords from a third-grade math standard here, and the keywords for addition and subtraction are place value, properties of operations, and the relationship between addition and subtraction. And if any of you have children in school at the elementary level, you'll recognize these examples I'm going to show. So here are the strategies that are taught to elementary school children for addition and subtraction. And a couple of these will actually meet that standard of place value, properties of operations, and relationship between addition and subtraction. These are crazy. Honestly, they're They're inefficient, they create confusion for children with math. Advocating that standards have nothing to do with curriculum. Right there, this proves it. This one actually does dictate curriculum. Relationship between addition and subtraction and place value, right there. If your child doesn't know what the properties of operations is, guess what? They're not going to get the answer correct. Well, technically, if they have the answer, that's not all they have for it to be the correct. It has to be the correct process. So they have to draw that little arc there in order to get it correct. Either way, no one should need an engineering degree to do elementary school math with their kids. It should be as easy as this. Wow, easy. It takes about 3 seconds. So how will this be tested? We all know that there are huge issues with SBAC testing, and Angie did allude to this in her presentation already, so I'm not going to go through it. I'm just going to quickly say it's hard to have an apples-to-apples comparison when you're using computer-adaptive testing. The tests can be manipulated, they can't be validated. The platform is defective, and hours upon hours of practice is required so kids can use this technology. Peg Lutz is the best source for that information, and hopefully you'll have a chance to hear her. So from my parental view, a culture shift is taking place under the guise of education reform. We are teaching children to value the collective rather than the individual, and this spills over to society in general. Perhaps it's the purpose, I don't know. But I can tell you that this is evidence of how the group work being done in school at this point. It's more important for the group to come up with a consensus answer than to actually have the answer correct. It's also referred to as project work, where children are given a problem or a question, told to work as a group to find the solution. Explaining the answer is the prized skill. That's what they're supposed to be doing, collaborating and coming up with a consensus. But children, especially young children, end up feeling bored, unengaged. Others just rely on the smart kid in the group. And some of those learn that it's actually okay to cheat off somebody else because they know the answer. This method is intended to teach critical thinking and collaboration. With threads of Common Core reaching into all core subjects, one may be shocked by the moral and ethical transformation that can happen in children when forced to follow the ideas of the group, per se. Imagine talking about a controversial subject in health class about, I don't know, abortion, or in civics about politics. If one child in this group thinks differently, do you really think they're going to have the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not right? There are multiple research studies that you can read by yourselves that show that this is just not true. Kids and parents, adults, all kinds of groups of people will just follow along with the crowd. We teach our children to resist peer pressure regarding drugs and alcohol, but then we put them in groups and encourage them to conform to social agendas. We are fooling ourselves if we hope to believe that children, especially young kids like kindergartners, being put into groups, sitting around talking about a topic, are going to stumble upon any real knowledge on a regular basis. In the business world, this is called collaboration. I use it every day. It's actually a really good thing, but it only works when everybody involved brings something to the table. You all are here different. You come from different counties, and you come together and you collaborate in the legislature. That only works because you all come from different areas. If all of you were the same, it wouldn't be as beneficial. For these kids, it makes them feel stupid. Okay? Little kids we're talking about. And maybe stupid's not the right word. I think we call it now productive struggle. That all sounds good in theory until you realize you're dealing with our children, our babies, that we are treating this way and killing their spirit and individuality. We're trying to make them all the same. I'm going to share this picture with you again from the beginning of the little girl doing homework. Does that look productive? So the actual definition of groupthink, this working in groups, is a pattern of thought characterized by self-deception, forced manufacture of consent, and conformity to group values and ethics. This is not how I want my children to learn to evaluate information, but this is how the masses are being educated, to go along with the crowd, forget about your family, church, or others who have taught you about morals, ethics, and values, And the school will make sure you get the correct value system based on what the government has provided in the standards. I love this picture. So is this the purpose? Blind conformity, because thinking of yourself is just too hard. Is that why we put young kids in groups? Do we ever want them to be able to think for themselves? Moving on to privacy and parental rights, Angie also talked about this a little bit, so I'll try and go quickly. I know my time's about ready to run out. But as we look at this slide, we see workforce agencies, private companies, other states, DHHR, all of these people are going to have some sort of access to your child's data. Why do they need this? Why would they need my child's personal, biometric, or psychometric data? And who do you think should control it? Do you ever think, in today's world of politics, money and power, that there could ever be a reason for this data to be used for nefarious purposes? You and I might like who's in Washington, D.C. right now, but if the tables were turned, is there any way that you could think of that this kind of data could be used in a way that you might not want it used as a parent? As a side note, did you know that the technology exists for an iPad to take the temperature of the person using it? A simple app. Also, another simple app can turn on your device's camera and microphone without you knowing about it, without the user knowing. Taking this kind of information and tracking it is a severe invasion of privacy. But more than that, it can be used by psychologists to figure out how a child feels about a certain topic. What's up with that? Is that all innocent? Are we really going to allow all of these agencies shown on this paper, and I'm sure there are more, are we going to allow them to have access to this finely grained data on all of our children? It's going to follow them through their college, through their career, maybe through their entire lifetime. Cradle to grave, I think they call it. So there's been a lot of recent news about privacy regarding the testing through SBC, Pearson. I'm going to just flip through these really quick. This is a news story about Pearson spying on children using Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. And then on the next slide, you'll see information from the SBAC's website that talks about Pearson and the Park Consortium. They actually do the spying themselves. The SBAC that West Virginia belongs to, they just show the schools how to do it. And this is their instructions to the schools about setting up Twitter, encouraging kids to follow them and whatnot. What I think is really creepy is that Pearson is actually able to see a child's post about a test on Twitter. We all know it's public. There's no expectation of privacy when you're posting on social media. But they can see this child's post about a test. They can associate it with a specific child in a specific county in a specific school. And they can report it to the school. So the school can provide the appropriate discipline. I don't know about you, but I think that's really creepy. So why does it matter? Does it? You think it matters? I think it matters for my kids. I think that's a severe invasion of privacy. So why does it matter? It matters because privacy issues are far-reaching. In a recent article on the topic of this same spying I just talked about with Park and Pearson, Jane Robbins of the American Principles Project is quoted as follows: "In case this isn't sounding enough like 1984 with 2015 technology, consider the other implications. This private foreign company undoubtedly now stores all of this information in its database. Bill student uses such and such a Twitter handle and such a Facebook page, and they're linked together. And by the way, he has made the following comments on each. And poor Bill student is now flagged forever as a cheater, even though maybe that post had nothing to do with cheating at all." By the way, the private foreign company that she is talking about is Pearson. They are a private foreign company. They provide curriculum materials all over our country, maybe even West Virginia. You should go check that out. A little bit closer to home here, up in Ohio County, in Wheeling, the student was actually able to hack into the West Virginia net system and disrupt testing for a little while this year, temporarily. So to get this straight, let's do a review. We're going to knowingly put our children's data out there into a system that can be linked to workforce agencies and basically anyone else on the planet with a so-called educational purpose within a system that a high school student can hack into. Are we that naive? There's a reason why juvenile records are sealed. Children are supposed to make mistakes, and they're supposed to be able to get a clean start, no matter what their past. It's called being children. So why don't we just listen to the children? What do they have to say about all this? My kids are here with me today. They're sitting in the back. And I asked them to write letters to the legislators last year, and you all got copies of it because I emailed them to all of you. But I thought it might be good at the end of this presentation to remind you what they thought about Common Core. Now, when I told them to write these letters, I thought I was going to get back, Mom said this, and Mom said this is bad, and Mom said that. Well, what I got was this. Every night I came home and did my homework. By the time I was done, I felt stupid, frustrated, sad, and angry. Many times when my mom and I would do homework, I would cry. I thought I would never be good at math, and children should never feel this way. For my oldest in high school, all my math seems to teach me is how unintelligent I really am. I don't understand how I can get straight A's because I don't understand the topics. It's almost as though the books are made to make you feel stupid. My sister and I are used to feeling completely confused and stupid to the point that we don't want to try anymore. Is that how classes are supposed to make us feel? And my personal favorite is this one. I feel like there's no hope for my future. And this is from my high school student freshman. So that's why I'm here. They're here. You feel free to ask them anything you want to about the testing. They've already had their testing. And I'm sure they'll be honest with you about what they think. So this is what our children do feel if you ask them. What are we, or rather you, who are the lawmakers of this state, going to do about it? So here's a picture. It's really not as pretty here with all the light shining down. It's a picture of a country road in West Virginia. I took it near where I live, in Tyler County. West Virginia has always been very unique. We have beautiful scenery. We have wonderful, friendly people. I'd like to leave you with a quote from John F. Kennedy, who said, "Conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth." I have proof of just about everything I've said here today, except what was my personal opinion, my personal story about my kids and I. If you'd like to see that proof, you can contact myself or West Virginia Against Common Core, the constitutional advocates. And I urge you to make the right decisions about our kids. Thank you.
According to the National Conference of State Legislators, there were 4 states that have never adopted Common Core. Those were Virginia, Nebraska, Alaska, and Texas. 3 states are developing new standards to replace Common Core currently, and 2 former Common Core states that are implementing other standards currently. And I'll talk about those 2 states and 3 states, basically 5 states that have repealed Common Core through legislation. In addition to those 5 states, according to the Education Commission of the states, as of the first of this month, there were still 5 states, additional states, that had legislation to repeal Common Core, whose legislatures have not finished their sessions yet. Those were Alabama, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New York. The first state that I'm going to talk about that repealed Common Core through legislation is Indiana. They repealed Common Core through some exceptionally simple legislation in 2014, but because of they had originally enacted some legislation to pause the implementation of Common Core in 2013. I think is why they were able to enact such simple legislation in repealing Common Core. Basically, all 5 states that have repealed Common Core did so standards to be the highest in the United States, requires standards to comply with the requirements from the federal flexibility waiver, and requires strict safeguards to protect the confidentiality of student data. And just want to point out a little bit about the legislation that they enacted a year previous to this. So they have been dealing with this before they enacted the 2014 legislation. In 2013, as I said, they enacted their legislation to pause implementation of Common Core. And just a few provisions from that legislation from 2013. They require the Department by July 1st, 2013, provide a written evaluation of Common Core standards to the Governor, Legislative Council, State Board, and the Legislative Standards Study Committee. Legislation required establishment of a Legislative Study Committee and required a final report of that committee by November 1st of 2013, and required that report include a comparison of the existing Indiana standards with Common Core standards, consideration of best practices for implementing and adopting the standards, and an evaluation of the costs associated with implementing PARC or Smarter Balance. The next state I'll talk about is Tennessee. They're only one of the 5 states that enacted legislation repealing Common Core this year, at least so far. This legislation required the state board to implement a process whereby Common Core state standards will be reviewed and replaced with a new set of standards. It requires the new standards to be adopted and fully implemented by the 2017-18 school year. It requires the state board to appoint 2 standards review and development committees, one for English language arts and the other for mathematics. It required the state board also to appoint 6 advisory teams to advise the applicable standards review and development committees. Each advisory team is assigned to specific grade levels in English language arts or mathematics. It requires that the public's assistance in reviewing and suggesting changes be elicited through a website that allows comment on the current standards. It created a standards recommendation committee to review and evaluate recommendations of the 2 standards review and development committees. It requires the standards recommendation committee to post the recommendations to a website to gather additional feedback from the public. It requires the standards recommendation committee to make final recommendations as to the new standards to the state board. And then it requires, prior to the next adoption of academic standards in science and social studies, the state board to establish a process whereby the board will receive recommendations from the standards recommendation committee. The third state that we'll talk about, these states are in no particular order, is Missouri, who passed legislation in 2014. The legislation required the state board by October 1st, 2014, to convene work groups to develop and recommend academic performance standards for each of the subject areas of English language arts, math, science, history, and governance. Required that 2 work groups be convened, one for grades K through 5 and the other for grades K through 6. The legislation required work groups to develop and recommend academic performance standards by October 1st of 2015. It requires the state board to adopt and implement academic standards beginning in the 2016-2017 school year. The legislation required assessment from Smarter Balance to be piloted during the 2014-15 school year, but the statewide assessment system is required to be aligned to the academic performance standards as needed. The legislation also provided that any time a new statewide assessment system is implemented, new academic standards are to be developed, or the Missouri School Improvement Program is changed. The first year is a pilot year for the purposes of calculating the district's annual performance report, and the results may not be used to lower a public school district's accreditation or for a teacher's evaluation. And lastly, Missouri's legislation included provisions relating to student data accessibility, transparency, and accountability for the statewide longitudinal data system. The fourth state that has repealed Common Core is Oklahoma. And again, this was in 2014. Their legislation required the state board on or before August 1st, 2016 to adopt standards for English language arts certification from the state regents or higher education that the subject matter standards for English language arts and mathematics in place prior to the revisions. Our college and career ready is defined by the ESEA flexibility document issued by the U.S. Department of Education. It required the state regents to provide the board a detailed description of the certification process and the results, including a list of the deficiencies that the state regents concluded that the state standards are not college and career ready. The bill required the state board on or before the 2017-18 school year to correct the process of the development of an annual high-quality statewide student assessments that align with the new English language arts and mathematics subject matter standards. It required the statewide student assessments for English language arts and mathematics assess standards and objectives found in the subject matter standards which were in place prior to revisions adopted by the board in June 2010 until the new assessments are implemented. It included provisions relating to prohibiting certain activities that would exceed or limit state discretion or control over the process of development, adoption, revision, or revision of subject matter standards and corresponding student assessments. It allowed the State Department of Education to participate in multi-state and multi-governmental cooperative pursuant to the Oklahoma Central Purchasing Act within certain limits. It included provisions requiring the state board to compare the new English language arts and mathematics standards with standards adopted prior to the implementation of the new standards. So basically, this just required those standards to be completed, to be compared with Common Core. And lastly, it created a legislative review process for revisions to subject matter standards and prohibits implementation until the review process is completed. And then the final state that has repealed Common Core so far was South Carolina. They did this during their 2013-14 legislative session. Their legislation required a review of the English language arts and mathematics state content standards not developed by the South Carolina Department of Education. The review was required to be conducted by July 1st, 2015, or excuse me, January 1st, 2015. And the new college and career ready state content standards are required to be implemented for the 2015-2016 school year. The legislation declared that South Carolina is no longer a governing or advisory state in the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Prohibits South Carolina from adopting or administering the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Included provisions relating to requiring the approval of the Educational Oversight Committee and the General Assembly before adoption or implementation of certain state content standards. It also included provisions relating to the procurement of assessments for the next several school years. And then lastly, it included provisions relating to the preservation and protection of individual and collective privacy rights and ensuring confidentiality and security of collective data. Madam Chair, that concludes our work.
Good afternoon, members. It's wonderful to be in front of you. I want to take this opportunity in a very methodical way to what I'm going to define as level setting, which is an opportunity to bring us up to speed of where we have been, where we are, and where we are currently going in the direction as far as where our standards are, and a variety of other comments that have been addressed today. I apologize for my tardiness. I did not get to hear all the additional comments that were being made, but I'm going to go through this in a very systematic, methodical way so that we're all on the same understanding of where the department is with our 55 counties in terms of the implementation of our standards. So if I may, let me just start, if I could, that the goal of the West Virginia New Educational Standards is for college and workforce readiness for all students. Keeping that in mind, that we're talking about college and career readiness for all students in West Virginia. As students progress through their grades, they will build upon skills and knowledge that they will need to be prepared for college-level courses and demands of the 21st century workplace. So as I talk about this to our teachers, I talk about vertical articulation, which is educational ease to say there's a connection. So when a child enters school, there is way that is vertically articulated, and that students who receive an education that is not only leads to a high school diploma, but also success in college, careers, and life after graduation, so that our young people are productive citizens and can make contributions to our great state. There has been some confusion, and oftentimes words are used interchangeably between the aspect of definition of standard, curriculum, and assessments. Understanding, a good teacher understands the distinction of those, but all of those are connected. A standard is what a child is expected to learn upon the completion of a course or a grade level. Let me state that again. A standard is what the expectation is, what a child is expected to complete upon the end of a grade level or course. So as we engage in a particular course, and I always use Algebra 1 as a former science and math teacher, it is the roadmap to the end. It says by the end of that course, this is what a child should be expected to learn. The curriculum is then what the teachers then deliver in terms of how those standards are met. Education standards provide the foundation for a curriculum, establishing what students need to learn, but not dictating how those standards should be taught. State education experts and teachers have worked to determine the essential skills and knowledge that students must know and be able to do to meet each standard. This framework helps teachers create lesson plans and guide their instruction and tailor how they teach the standards to the specific needs of their students. So in essence, the curriculum is a local decision where our teachers are providing how those standards are being met. The assessment then wraps around in a cyclic manner to ensure that what is being taught is being measured in the proper way. Are we truly measuring to the level of success and fidelity that young people are mastering the concepts that we said the standards are putting out there that we say students need to know? The curriculum delivering those in a manner so that they master those standards, and the assessment is formulated in a way to ensure that they know how to do that. If not, the expectation is that teachers then wrap back around to reteach those skills and concepts in a way where there is mastery of concepts. I'm sure many of you had a conversation about students being promoted to the next grade level, social promotions, without the knowledge and mastery. The standards that are in place now are vertically articulated, connections from grade level to grade level, with the assurance that we have assessments in place that students are not advanced to the next grade level without that mastery of content. There's been a great conversation, I'm sure, in this body, as well as in other bodies across our nation, about that particular item. The aspect that we also need to recognize is that the standards are in the particular areas of English, language arts, and mathematics. We need to make certain that we're understanding that when we're talking about our standards in West Virginia and our Common Core standards that we're talking about, where the basis of West Virginia standards are based upon English language arts and mathematics. So let me get a little more specific. In English language arts, students will read more complex non-fiction and fiction texts. They will learn to create written arguments using evidence from multiple texts to gather evidence to defend their opinion. There will be an expectation that they interact with the text in a way to understand, to justify, to be able to defend a position, not just reading for the sake of reading, but expected to make decisions based upon that reading. In middle and high school, students will apply the literacy skills to mathematics, science, social studies, and technical subjects. Learning to read well and write well in all subjects is critical. So reading across the curriculum and writing across the curriculum is absolutely critical. As we talk about the aspect of we want young people to be able to solve problems and think critically. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that we're involved in an information revolution, and there's more information out there now more than ever. And students need to be able to access and analyze that information with a level of precision so that they can take that information and then extrapolate it to solve problems that haven't even been invented yet, which we're expecting our young people to be able to look at those real-world experiences. We need to understand that standards, that the English language math standards ask teachers and students to dig deeper into the core skill and concepts areas at each grade level, focusing on the most important topics that students need to know. The expectation is that teachers will have more time to focus on particular areas. We oftentimes use the quote that it was a mile wide and an inch deep also acknowledge, as we continue to talk about level setting and to bring us onto the same page. Throughout the legislative session, I talked about our previous standards that we had in place. Those standards were evaluated by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and our grade before the implementation of our current standards in the area of English language arts, we received a grade in West Virginia of a grade of D. In the area of math, we received a grade of a B. Our current standards, evaluated by the same body, have received a grade of a B+ in English language arts and a grade of an A- in math. One of the main criteria that was graded in that overview was the fact, is there that alignment to college and careers? That piece was a major piece that was missing from our standards in West Virginia previously. It is a fully articulated system that aligns from pre-K through 12 with opportunities for us to benchmark, look at where we are with our assessments, and provide those interventions to go back and reteach in a fully articulated system, pre-K through 12. As I continue, I'm going to have some other individuals join me at the podium, but I also want to express some other issues that are relevant and germane to the overall topic today. There has been great conversation about the aspect of data privacy. We have talked about it on numerous occasions, and yet some of the same pieces of information continue to be recited. So let me begin in an attempt to level set and put us on the same playing field. Let me talk about the aspect of privacy. West Virginia's alignment of its next generation standards with the Common Core state standards and the use of smarter balance assessment does not compromise the privacy of student data. The West Virginia Department of Education provides de-identified student assessment results to the Smarter Balance Consortium so that the assessment questions can be validated and calibrated. The de-identification of the data means that the Smarter Balance Assessment will only know that a student is from West Virginia and will have no other way to identify a student by name, school, city, or county. This memorandum of understanding also contains a West Virginia specific privacy addendum that we've included, and we can provide more detail on that. But let me emphasize again that no individual student data will be sent to the United States Department of Education by West Virginia Department of Education, to the testing vendor, or to the Smarter Balance Consortium. The privacy will not be compromised. Let me address another issue that I want to bring you up to speed on. There has been great conversation about the assessments that are currently going on in our schools right now, better known as the Smarter Balance Assessments. There's been conversations about opting out, and that word has been used throughout the nation. Let me be very clear in terms of the position of which we ascribe to as a department and the guidance that has been provided to our superintendents. First and foremost, there is no provision in the West Virginia law that provides parents and students the ability to opt out of the West Virginia General and Summative Assessment. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 requires schools with students in grades 3 through 12 to identify what is called adequate yearly progress. In order to make that adequate yearly progress, the school must ensure that assessments have been taken by at least 95% of enrolled students in each one of those student groups. Additionally, West Virginia law requires the West Virginia Board of Education to establish a comprehensive statewide student assessment program. The statewide assessment program is used to assess student progress, determine college and career readiness, and is in fact used in school accreditation process. This is in the West Virginia law. So based upon that, there is no option to opt out. However, parents have the option to refuse to test. with consequence. Consequence in terms of the data that is provided for us to make good instructional decisions about school improvement in our state is critical to having a very high-quality set of public schools in West Virginia. That data is critical. That data is used by parents all across our state to provide additional support for their young people in schools, to have conferences and interactions with teachers in all of our schools. It guides the school improvement process and is critical to the decision-making that occurs in our state. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward with the process, I'm going to come back up and speak in more detail about where we're going. In recognizing the conversations that occurred throughout the legislative session, I too have become concerned about some of the conversations that have occurred. I firmly believe that the standards in which we have in place are highly articulated and very well-rounded and solid standards. As I've stated, the grades which they've received from several outside sources. But I also recognize that there was lots of conversation throughout the legislative session about concerns with the standards. And it's no question, I've gone on record several times, not one person across our state has given me a specific concern with a particular standard. And I think it's critical for this body to understand that there was conversations about repeal and not to repeal, but yet not one person could provide me with a specific standard that they had a particular concern about. And I think that's critical in the conversation, because throughout my time as being your superintendent, which is a short period of time, I've been on a very robust listening and learning tour throughout our state. I have visited 26 counties. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of students, hundreds and hundreds of teachers around this particular topic. And yet I have had no one tell me particularly a concern with a particular standard. So I'm going to provide more detail about a process in which we are engaging in our department right now, which is a review process of the standards. As Mr. Hager just spoke about the process of the legislation that was introduced during your session, we are building upon that, and we are going to go through a comprehensive review process of our standards. We have begun the work after your legislative session ended. My work continued at the department in a very robust manner. We are going to be engaging in a very solid review process where we're going to be asking every citizen of the state of West Virginia to check in, to read our standards, to review our standards, and to comment what those concerns are. Again, going back to where we were previously, where there was no specific standard that was highlighted or identified as problematic. See, that's when I made those distinctions between standards and curriculum. There were a number of folks who provided information about particular tasks or instructional tasks that were concerned, but no specific standards was highlighted. We're working with WVU as a partner. We're going to provide that level of objectivity of the data that we analyze once that feedback is provided, to be able to provide information to me, to the state board, so that decisions can be made about where we are with our standards. I think ultimately all of us want, as I've listened to the conversation throughout the session and throughout my time being here in West Virginia, that there's no question that the common denominator for all of us is that we want the very best educational system for our students. We can agree to that. We also can agree that we want to make certain our young people are prepared for college and careers, and that when they graduate from our high schools in West Virginia, that the diploma means something, that it has a level of validity and value, that a student has completed a series of courses and experiences that deems them ready for the next level of their development in terms of college and careers. And through the process also, the thing that's got me most concerned and ramped up as your superintendent is taking a look at the data that really matters, the metrics that matter to our state, and how concerned I am about our graduation rate. So when we have standards that are lower, and we have young people dropping out, what does that say to the future of our state? Because I'm from the philosophy that if we're talking about economic development for our state, it has to rest in the lack of education. The more educated our populace is, the better off our state is. And so when young people graduate from high school, they have to be college and career ready. And again, repeating myself with a sense of emphasis, that diploma needs to matter. And it's unconscionable that we are graduating young people across this nation, not just in West Virginia, who are not prepared to go into college courses that are credit bearing. That young people are providing, having to enter into a remediation course. And we know the skyrocketing costs of higher education. And so when young people are in remediation courses, those are courses that are not credit bearing but still have to be paid for. And if a student takes a loan out and they don't receive a credit and they drop out of that non-credit bearing course, they still have to pay for that loan. So what we are attempting to do in our reform efforts, and again as I level set and bring us to the same page, is to have a very robust, high-quality educational system with fully articulated standards that define what a child should be able to do from pre-K through 12, but very clearly articulated horizontally in each one of those grade levels. So again, doing the right thing to ensure when a child is promoted, that they are promoted with the skills to go to the next grade level, and not just socially promoting students. That we have opportunities to intervene when a child is showing early warning signs and risk of dropping out, or they're falling behind, setting up a system that allows for that. And so I end with this. I am most proud of the work that is occurring in our great state. I have spent so many hours and days visiting 26 of our 55 counties with the goal of visiting all of our counties within the next year. And again, having those conversations with children and young people, and teachers and community members, and seeing the quality work that's occurring by our teachers and our principals is very, very heartwarming. But we also need to do better. And we also need to recognize that the students in West Virginia are entitled to the highest quality of education, not just for some, but for all. But standards have to be there in place to ensure that. So at this time, what I'd like to do is have some additional members of my staff, Clayton and Teresa, if you'd please come up, if you would, and provide some additional information about some specifics of where we are, and then I can go into some more detail about that as well. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Clayton Burst, Chief Academic Officer of the Department of Education. I'll keep the comments brief and really let you hear from Teresa Hammond, who was actually a teacher during the period of time from 2010 when we began this process, and has now transitioned to the department to help us continue leading this effort. So standards, as you heard from Dr. Marrano, we are committed to college and career readiness. As I was beginning to board plane earlier last week, he texted me a picture. This is a picture of he had taken of a child during pre-K graduation. And it reminded me that this is 2015, and this particular pre-K child will graduate, hopefully, if on track, 2028. What will it take to get the 280,000 like him there? So we are very, very committed to assuring a word you heard him say is the articulation. And there's not a whole lot of folks and the things that I trust, but I'll tell you what I do trust. I can trust our teachers. And what we want to take a little bit of time to do, and what I did not hear enough of during this past year as we went through this discussion, I did not hear enough about the 3,000 teachers from our state and our communities who helped us do this work. They've been there from the beginning. And we tend to hear about the state board adopting standards in 2010 and the rollout. But actually what happened was, and I'm going to have Teresa talk a little bit about it, was we knew things weren't working. In the 1990s, we had IGOs. Does anyone remember IGOs? Instructional Goals and Objectives. And what happened? The needle didn't move. We shifted to the 21st century. The needle still didn't move. In 2005, still are only one out of every 3 children are reading at grade level of 3rd grade, one of the greatest predictors of meeting that will want to meet college career readiness and graduate from high school. 2 out of 3 children in 3rd grade still are not reading at grade level. What's wrong? We've had standards. So the question posed when Common Core came about and came to West Virginia and was presented to the state board, and what we asked our teachers to do. At that time, there were 80 core teachers in 2010 that took them because we didn't trust them. We've always had our own standards. Are these truly aligned? Do these meet our needs? Are these going to do something different that hasn't been done in 2 decades in West Virginia? And what they found was there wasn't a whole lot of difference in the standards. As a matter of fact, in K through 5 in ELA, 83% of the current standards that are next generation or Common Core are actually aligned to the 21st century standards. 83%. In math, 61%. What makes them different? The time and effort these teachers took during that first year that ended up expanding to 3,000 teachers was the alignment you heard Dr. Martirano talk about. Where are our gaps? Why did our old standards not work? So I'm going to ask Teresa Hammond to come up. She was a teacher during that time. She came out of the classroom. When I first met Teresa, she was actually a teacher who, probably better in your own words because I might use words that you use, who was paranoid, did not trust the new standards because she had worked and been part of the old standards. So Teresa, if you could, I'd like to walk through a little bit of time.
Thank you, Claire. I was one of the 80 teachers that was asked by the Department of Education to come to a hotel room in Morgantown and spend the better part of a year looking at standards. I am a veteran teacher. If I were still in the classroom, this would have been my 28th year. I had taught the IGOs. I had taught the 21st century standards, and actually I really like the 21st century standards. They made a lot of sense to me. You see, I'm a parent in West Virginia as well, and I had a daughter in our school system, and I wanted the best for her. So it made sense that not only did my job emphasize high quality standards, but my daughter, I want the best for her. I didn't want her to be from a state that didn't have high quality standards. And I was thankful for those 21st century standards. And I really wasn't excited about something new taking their place. But what I found now when I work with these other educators, and we were all in a room in a hotel, we sat down and we were told to read through your grade level and tell us what you think. And hands started raising after a while, and people were like, well, these are what we're already doing. They were very much similar to what we were doing. But the one thing that was different was this progression. And it was something that I needed to be educated on myself. Because in the last decade, we were given the opportunity, because of research and the medical field, brains, and how the brain learns, we were given information about how children learn. And these progressions were very much aligned to that scientific research. Well, in that year, learning about the progressions and looking at the standards and looking at our own standards, we figured out there were some standards that needed to be shifted around because they weren't in the progression. And we added our own standards that we felt were important to those standards. Then we did a crosswalk between the standards that we have for the 21st century standards and the new next generation standards. Well, by the end of that year, I was so excited about the standards that I went back to my classroom and I began teaching them. And I had a little bit of a problem because my standards were not aligned to the assessment that we were giving West Virginia students. And it was very frustrating for me as a teacher to know that we look at standards and assessment being aligned goals for students, what the students were supposed to do, what they were able to know, understand, and be able to do by the time they finished our curriculum. They were very clear, and they were good. Well, I was asked then to come back and start writing lessons because curriculum was a problem. There weren't enough programs, and I say programs because one of the things that you will see in West Virginia is that we have a wonderful and very precise way of adopting curricula in the state. We have a committee of teachers who look at curriculum, review it. Publishers submit their work to us, whether it is electronic or textbook versions. Our team looks at that curriculum. Then we bring teachers in from all over the state to review it. And they have a rubric. You can find that rubric online. That rubric is very detailed, measuring whether they have meet general criteria, which is what our teachers want the children to know for that particular subject. And then, do they meet the standards? Will, after using that curriculum, the teacher use that tool and help a child meet those goals, the standards set for them? Well, what is nice is that once the state has looked at all of this information, they have to have an 80% alignment to the standards. Then your counties are given the option to look at that curriculum that we have found that aligns, and then they choose what is best for their counties. We have schools that see other programs out there that they like, and they feel that it will help them assess students or teach students so they can assess them on the standards effectively. And they can write papers, or they can use materials other than what has been chosen as an 8% alignment. They can choose other curriculum. And that gives a little bit of a different spin on things, because you have individual schools and individual classroom teachers choosing curricula that may or may not be aligned with the standards. So I think that when we have issue with what is being taught in the classroom and what the standards are saying, that might be where we need to look a little more closely. Because the standards are not curriculum. They are a set of goals. In the summer of 2011, we started gradually rolling out the standards to kindergarten teachers throughout the state. I was in Morgantown at Teacher Leadership Institute, and I was a facilitator for that. I was still in the classroom. And we brought in, I think it was over 700 kindergarten teachers from around the state. They got blocks, they got play, instructional materials to play, for children to play and learn through play. Kindergarten had become very much like a first grade classroom. And what was being asked, the goals that were going to be met for our kindergarten standards, were the children were going to have to develop skills that would teach them. But children learn through play. And all of the research shows that play is a child's work. So our kindergarten teachers were elated that their children would not be doing worksheets, that they were going to be able to do their learning through play. That was a big day, and it was wonderful to see those teachers as they started out. Well, those teachers went back to their classrooms. They told their colleagues about these new standards in English and mathematics. And other teachers became interested. They started looking at them, because then the next year, second and third grade started teaching, and then fourth and fifth grade. every grade in the state of West Virginia, K through 12, we're all teaching our new next generation standards. We took time. We listened to teachers. One of the things I want to leave you with is I'm right now the math and science coordinator for elementary and early childhood. And I was invited to go to the math conference in Stonewall. And I talked to a lot of teachers there. Now, these are the finest math teachers in the state. And it was in March, which was when there was still some question about, we're going to keep our standards, what are we going to do? We're worried. They didn't want to go back. The teachers don't want to go back. I talk to hundreds of teachers every week. They don't want to go back because they know that if given time, the opportunity to really implement these standards, they're going to see great things. And one of the teachers said, I was asked by my delegate why I wasn't in Charleston talking about the repeal of the standards and why I didn't want them repealed. And her response was to her delegate, I'm teaching kids. I don't have time to talk to politicians. And that's what we really need to focus on. Our teachers are frontline people who did the work, who reviewed the standards, who had every opportunity to say, wait a minute, no way, we don't want these. And resoundingly, West Virginia teachers said, yes, we want these standards and we want the opportunity to have to teach our children. We want the best for West Virginia children, just like everyone in this room. And so I thank you for your time and my opportunity to tell you a little bit more about how those standards involve West Virginia teachers and how West Virginia teachers are in high support. Thank you very much.
So as I started my presentation, I stated 3 continuous improvement questions. Where have we been? Where are we? And where we're going? And as I was very clear in stating, I wanted to make certain we understood in terms of level setting and a variety of different topics associated with the reform efforts occurring in education in West Virginia. But I do want to end with a reminder of a point that I briefly touched upon regarding our next steps. Again, taking the feedback from many of you in this room and many of our elected officials and community members, we will be going through a comprehensive review of our standards. The goal of this project is to commence a public evaluation process for West Virginia Next Generation Content Standards and Objectives. The process is divided into 2 phases, with the goal of allowing educators and citizens of West Virginia the opportunity to evaluate the standards and provide specific recommendations for revisions. Already we are underway in terms of making certain individuals know about it. There is a video on our website, and we will be promoting that information with our superintendents and continuing to promote that throughout our state with a very robust media campaign. The target date to launch phase 1 of the evaluation process will be this month. An online standards evaluation tool is being customized for West Virginia and will allow educators as well as the public to evaluate West Virginia's next generation content standards and objectives and make recommendations for revisions, additions, or deletions. The website will remain open until September 2015 in order to provide ample time for thoughtful feedback for those that want to participate in the evaluation. During this window, West Virginia University and the West Virginia Department of Education will facilitate an ongoing campaign to inform and encourage all stakeholders to participate in the evaluation process. After the online evaluation process ends, analysis and comments will be conducted by on the results of the online standards evaluation process. During October through November of 2015, the West Virginia University College of Education will engage and facilitate educator advisory groups to perform a thoughtful review and analysis of the comments received on the standards. These educators will include K through 12 teachers in the areas of English language arts and mathematics, as well as higher education staff. The Southern Regional Education Board, better known as SRAB, another independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan party that will work with 16 member states, including West Virginia, to improve public education, will also be involved in the standards evaluation process. SRAB will assist in the data analysis of the comments and will provide content area experts to consult and assist the educator advisory groups. At the conclusion of Phase 2, WVU will provide a report to the West Virginia Board of Education, to myself and the department, containing the recommendations of the educator advisory groups for amendments to the West Virginia academic standards in English language arts and mathematics. Such recommendations will be based upon the public comment received and the work of the educator advisory groups. The target date for the Board of Education, the West Virginia Board of Education, to receive the revised standards for placement on a 30-day public comment period is December 2015. So I end with the fact that we have a very robust activity engaging process occurring right now in our state around our standards. We're asking all of our citizens to participate in this because at the end of the day, our goal is to have the very best standards that are West Virginia standards for the students in West Virginia.